Hello, BookTube. I have a tag for you today, even though it's not Tag Tuesday. All the cool kids are doing this tag, and I thought sure when I looked at it that I'd already done it. But I haven't. I haven't explicitly done it. I've done a lot of videos like it, but not this specific tag, so I thought I would do this just to make sure that my tag list is complete. This was made by Allan at Big Hard Books and Classics, and it is the Reading Pet Peeves tag. I've done quite a few of those. Nick Stewart just did a video about reading pet peeves, and I did a response video to that, listed a whole bunch, but these are different. These prompts are slightly different, so I thought I'd go over them today and get this tag on as a notch on my belt. Prompt number 1 is, do you use or read along with audiobooks? And I don't. If I want to sit around while some schmuck drones in my ear, I'd still be married to Deb. But in all seriousness, no, I don't use audiobooks because, for me, reading things critically, like those of you who are new to my channel, I am a book critic. That's my profession, and for me, it's intolerable to have an intermediary between me and the words on the page. It's just intolerable for me to do that, and that is what you get with an audiobook. You have the author doing their best to create a narrative tone, to create characters through the use of words. But with an audiobook, you have that, and then you have someone reading those words. And they're putting an intonation, they're giving characters different voices, they're giving a pacing to the written language that may not be the pacing that you want, or even the pacing that you think best applies. I mean, if you give Sir Ian McKellen a boring piece of prose, it's not going to be boring when he's reading it to you. And if it's the first encounter you have with that prose, it's going to be frozen in your mind that this is better prose than it actually is, if that makes any sense. I suppose I know a lot of people on BookTube are devoted fans of audiobooks for filling in time when they can't be sitting reading. A lot of people have told me that audiobooks are an amazing world on their own if you get the right narrator. And I understand that completely. That makes perfect sense. But that, for me, would be adjacent to reading. It wouldn't be a substitute for reading because it would be interpolating someone else's interpretation of the prose in between me and the text. And as a critic, I certainly can't do that. Certainly. Because I could be responsible for telling readers whether or not the prose is any good. Well, what prose is going to sound bad if Julie Andrews is reading it? None. But the prose could still be bad. Now, I want to do that myself. I want to discern what the characters sound like, the pace at which they talk, whether the author says so or not. I want to determine where the stress falls in descriptive passages. I want to do that. I don't want someone else to do that. But I know that there are plenty of diehard fans of audiobooks out there, and I think, that's great. More power to you. The only thing that confuses me about audiobooks on BookTube and off BookTube, actually, is I've heard just a flat factual declaration from a lot of people on and off BookTube that is very much of the 21st century, where it is now common, because social media allows people to live in fully mediated reality bubbles and never be challenged about actual reality. There are a whole bunch of examples I could come up with where people on Twitter or on social media simply flatly state some aspect of reality that isn't true. But because they've carefully curated the bubble in which they state it, they don't get any pushback. That's how there are flat earthers in the world. And I've heard something along those lines on BookTube and off, that listening to an audiobook is reading the book. And it obviously factually is not. They're two different procedures. They're two different things. I would argue that they also operate differently, but even if you disregard the fact that an actor or a voice actor is intermediating the book for you, even if you leave that out, you forget, you don't care about it, I care about it. But you can't deny that it's happening. It's not the same thing. You might as well say that windsurfing is reading. They're just obviously factually two different things. So I never quite understand that. I can't help but think that the people who stress that the most do it out of defensiveness. And I don't see why that's warranted. If you listen to audiobooks, more power to you. There's no reason to be defensive. But in this, I don't want to get too political, but in this as in anything else along these lines, you're entitled to love X, Y, or Z, to be partial to X, Y, or Z, to want, let's say, equal social treatment for X, Y, or Z, but you are not entitled to tell me that X is Y. You can say it all you want, but you can't make me parrot it back to you if it's factually not true. So that's the only part of audiobooks that I don't get, but I don't see that often. So, and the rest of it is great because people will, I've heard from so many people where listening to books on audio really makes them feel like their reading life has come alive again. And that's fantastic. That is just fantastic to hear that. I would argue in a persnickety kind of way that it's adjacent to reading. But it's not the same thing. It's more like listening to a friend than it is reading a book, because someone else is reading the book to you. You're not reading it yourself, which to me is a deal breaker, but not to a lot of people. And a lot of the sheer positives that people have said about audiobooks, it more than counterbalances that for me. And then prompt number 2 is, do you utilize your local library? Not my local library. My local library is a 5-minute walk from here. It's a branch of the Boston Public Library. I utilize the Boston Public Library, the huge library in Copley Square, which is not local. In fact, it's less local this month than ever. It's harder for me to get there now than it was a week ago. The whole line of the subway system here in Boston has shut down until late September. But the Boston Public Library is intertwined for me with so many personal memories that it wouldn't be as much fun to make the branch library that I can walk to my central library. Since I remember when that building was renovated, and before that I remember when it was a cheap bistro, and before that I remember when it was a field. So there's no way that I can feel the same way about it as I do about the Boston Public Library, where I've spent endless amounts of time. I used to spend a lot of time there every day, working in Bates Hall, and then my dogs got sick, and I couldn't justify it, so I had to come and spend time with them, and then COVID hit, and the library in Copley Square just fell off my routine, but it has recently come back to my routine. I don't use it for new releases so much, because I get most of the new releases that I want long before the library does, and I won't deal with a waiting list. I simply will not put my name on a waiting list. But I've found that the new release section, I mean, I go to a lot of other sections in the BPL now to explore them. But I found that even the new release section will often crop up things that were new at the beginning of the year or late last year that I never got to, or that never came to me. So even there, it's extremely fruitful, and I imagine it will stay that way. It's very nice to have the Boston Public Library back in my life. Then number 3 is, do you DNF books? For those of you who are new to BookTube, that is BookTube shorthand for did not finish. And in my opinion, it is different from just parking a bookmark in a book and putting it aside because you're kind of not in the mood and you'll get back to it. DNF to me means I am not going to finish this book. I have stopped. I have given the author as much of a chance to capture me as a reader as I am going to give them, and now I'm going to stop. And if under that reading of DNFing, I never do it anymore. I read very fast, and I read for a huge amount of every day, so I cannot justify it. Even if halfway through the author is boring me or condescending me or angering me, I'm still going to read to the end, even just coasting on those emotions, to say nothing of the fact that the author could turn things around. So I virtually never do it anymore, no. Then prompt number 4 is, do you read multiple books at the same time? I saw Vin at Revenant Reads did a version of this tag where he points out that technically you can't do that, but I get the sense of the question. And for me, a lot of the people that I've seen, the cool kids have been doing this tag, a lot of them have said, yeah, they have multiple books going at the same time, and the thing that determines it is the genre of the book. So I won't have 2 science fiction novels at the same time. I won't even have 2 novels at the same time, but I might have a collection of letters and a novel going separately. But for me, that doesn't matter. For me, the important thing is location, the location of the book, where I have a book and an e-reader on my nightstand. I have a book on the toilet. I have a book in my bag and an e-reader in my bag. And I have a pile of books on the stool by the fainting couch that are workbooks. They're things that I'm working on right now and reading right now. And usually I just leave them and don't carry any book between those separate locations. The only time that I do is an important diagnostic for me, which is if a book makes me do that. If I'm reading some book, new or old, and I don't want to read anything else when I'm reading, where I'm reading a book and it is so good, bad, interesting, gripping, whatever it is, where it doesn't let me go. I'm sure you know the kind of book I'm talking about, the kind of book that we're all in this for, I would argue. We'll make weight with other books that have moments that are good, but we're in it for those books, the ones that take us completely out of ourselves and the world. I'm in it for that same as anybody else. And when I hit a book like that, I pay attention. I don't fight it. If I hit a book like that and I don't say, well, I would bring this into the bathroom or to the nightstand, but it's not the book that's in that location. No. If a book does that to me, I let it do that to me, and I carry it everywhere. And I pay attention. That, like I said, that's a diagnostic. That's an effect of the book. That's not an effect of my mood. I'm not a mood reader. That's an effect of the book. And that's worth noting, especially if it's a new book or forthcoming book. Then prompt number 5 is, do you make time or have specific time in your day devoted to reading? And I do. Pretty much my whole day and night is devoted to reading. I have a little schnauzer. There is a needlepoint version of Frida. I have a cute little schnauzer. She is a very low maintenance dog. She's really smart and wonderful company, but she does not demand much. Occasionally she wants to go for a walk. Less as time goes on. I've noticed that she will go for long stretches where it doesn't even cross her mind to do. She doesn't really like to play anymore. Every once in a while she'll be up for it, but usually not. She's outgrown it. She likes to talk, and she likes to hang out, and she likes belly rubs now and again. And if she asks even remotely for any of those things, I immediately give it to her. There's no hesitation. It's not like I'm not ever gonna say to her, I need to get this done first. No. I went so many decades of my life where I worked in retail or I worked for onerous deadlines or whatnot, where I did have to say that to dogs and hated it every time. Now I'm in a point in my life where I don't have to say that ever. So I don't. So I just don't say it ever. But aside from her, it's all books. Reading or writing about what I read. All. That'll change in November for NaNoWriMo. But like, for instance, I have a set routine that I've had forever and ever, which is that at midnight, I turn into a pumpkin. I turn off all electronics, or in the ye olden days, I unplug the phone and make myself unreachable by the outside world and just read just voraciously until 6 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, sometimes straight through to the next day. And that's a lot of reading at my speed. That gets a lot done. But it's not reserved for then either. Like just today, I took Frida out for our morning walk. I came back. It's already roasting hot, so we cleaned off and cleaned up. And then I reclined on the fainting couch, and I thought, well, I'll do the overnight emails. I'll do some administrative stuff to get ready for the bulk of the day. And instead, I started reading and just kept reading for I think 3 hours. So. And that could easily happen this afternoon as well. It's not just the reading that I do at night. The point I'm trying to make is that most of my life is devoted to reading. And believe you me, I don't take that for granted. I am incredibly grateful about that. I know so many of you that I've met through BookTube who love reading just as much as I do. But you aren't able to do that. You have kids or a family or a job you have to go to that doesn't involve reading. All sorts of other things that just... A lot of you don't have a surly houseboy, so you have no one to take care of the house cleaning, no one to do the meals, no one to pay the bills. You have to do all that yourself. That takes time. All of that takes time away from reading. Where the will is there, the love of reading is there, but you can't do it. And I have been in that position in the past sometimes, so I'm very grateful that I get to devote virtually all of my life to reading now. Prompt number 6 is, do you dog ear books? And I know this is going to horrify a lot of you, but I do. It's just too easy. If I've got some advanced copy, it's not even the finished copy of the book, and I have to work my way through it, I'm responsible for it, I'm writing about it, it's just too easy. I don't carry those multicolored plastic tabs around with me. I don't carry 10 bookmarks around with me. That's why I sort of like ebooks, because then I'm not defacing anything. I can put tabs all over an ebook and find them easily. But if it's a print, an unbound, just a unbound pages with rubber bands around them, and I'm reading that as an advanced copy of the book, I'm not going to keep that. I'm not going to resell it. I'm going to throw it away. So I dog ear the pages, just because I can get right to them. Prompt number 7 is, do you annotate your books? I do, extensively, even when I don't want to, even when I'm not thinking about it. When I'm thinking, this is just nothing. This is just a tiny little thing. It doesn't mean anything. It's maybe a 100-page book for Garb August or something like that. I'm not going to annotate anything here. It doesn't matter. I am so inculcated over so many decades to talking with my books, just entering into a dialogue with them. That's what I view them as. That I can't stop myself. I absolutely can't stop myself. The horrifying thing for not being able to stop myself, some of you will be horrified by this, is that I literally can't stop myself. Which means if I have a book out from the library, I don't want any of you to faint, so I don't have to finish that. I will point out that I annotate very lightly and in pencil. Anyway, I do annotate extensively, yes, even in mass market paperbacks, which is, again, another reason why I love ebooks so much. Because I can annotate to my heart's content without running out of room, without anything blurring, without anything like that. It's true, I'm not making a physical palimpsest of annotations in one book like behind me on the wall somewhere is C.S. Lewis's book, An Experiment in Criticism. And I have annotated that 4 or 5 different times, different pen colors, different dates. I don't get a palimpsest like that on an ebook, but who knows that I might not someday. On some of them, they haven't really been around long enough to do that. But yeah, I annotate almost compulsively, yes. If I put, I think, 4 annotations on Taken by the T-Rex, then yeah, I think it's safe to say I annotate anything I read. And another piece of annotation that I absolutely cannot stop, it's the oldest training in the world, I just cannot stop it, is to draw a light circle around typos. So not where I'm disagreeing with the author, but where a typo has made it into the finished text. It's not even conscious anymore. There are plenty of books out there, not necessarily at the library, we won't traumatize you, but like, for instance, I get a book used or from a publisher. It's huge. I get to page 612. They're going to be, maybe it hasn't been doing anything for me. I haven't been thinking or arguing or talking about it with it all. There are plenty of books out there in the wild that have no annotations except that you're reading along, you're thinking, wow, no one read this before me. And then you get to page 612 and one typo is circled. And suddenly you know, oh my God, somebody not only read this, but read all the way to here. That has happened. I don't know how many of those books are out in the wild. I can't stop myself from doing that. And the final question, number 8, is how do you feel about spoilers? I couldn't care less about them. I learned an appreciation of reading totally in a different way from spoilers. I learned an appreciation of reading from the classics of Greece and Rome, who didn't have the concept. The spoiler for a Greek play or the Roman adaptation of a Greek play was not what happens. It was how the playwright does it. You already know the story of Oedipus. You already know the story of Alcestis or Medea. You already know that story. So the reason you're there sitting in the hot sun all day is to watching the show is to see how the author does it. Spoilers, no one would, the ancient Greeks wouldn't have understood even what you were talking about. And I imbibed that from those works of literature. So by the time I got to books that actually cared about it, much less readers that did, I was permanently on a different wavelength. I don't care about them at all. Not at all. I try hard on this channel, and especially in reviews, written reviews, to respect it, to not give away the ending, as my generation used to put it, instead of spoilers, because it doesn't spoil the book. If someone giving away a detail of the ending spoils the book for you, the book is terrible, or you're a bad reader. but it doesn't spoil the book, so I don't like that term, but I'll use it just fine for shorthand, and I do respect it. I mean, it's just bad form anyway, right? Even if it's not a surprise ending, you want to preserve for them the feeling of discovery that you had. So it's not the same thing as, a snowflake trigger warning. I try to be mindful of it. If there's a twist at the end of a book, I certainly don't talk about it unless it's so much in the common domain. Moby Dick lives. that it's your fault, in other words, if you don't know it. But other than that, no, I try. There's always a way around it. It's no hindrance to you talking about any work of literature. You can talk about it all you want without giving away the ending. Unless it's the ending that you want to talk about, in which case you just have to talk about it with people who already know it. So a famous example that I always give is Hannibal by Thomas Harris, where something very important happens at the end of that book. I won't tell you what it is, but I'll try not to anyway. But to a fellow reader of Hannibal, I will go on until the cows come home. Same thing with, there was recently a book, what was it, last year? Or the year before that? It was called The Delivery. It was about a delivery boy making deliveries on a bicycle. I'm forgetting the author's name. I still have the book. And you follow along in the storyline of him going through adventures, delivering stuff to people, and his descriptions of the people he delivers them to, and his sadistic dispatcher, and the one virtuous girl at the office that he likes, and that he thinks he might more than like. And at the very end of that book, the whole book is betrayed in a way that I don't think the author realizes. And that was a case where, with Hannibal, for instance, there's a whole bunch else that you can talk about without talking about the ending. Hannibal's actually a brilliant novel. So there's enormous, you could write 10 reviews and never allude to the ending. But with The Delivery, if that was the name of it, is it Mendel? Oh, anyway. With The Delivery, the whole book is changed by the thing at the very end. And so I couldn't review it. I was frustrated reviewing it because there's no way to talk about it that isn't affected by the thing that happens at the very end. And that would be a spoiler, very much a spoiler. So it depends on my audience. If I'm talking just verbally, face to face with someone who knows the ending of the book, then yes. But otherwise, no, wouldn't dream of it. And in defense of my own industry that I bash quite a bit, there aren't many editors who would let that go through either. That doesn't usually happen. Even if an author were boorish or crass enough or dumb enough, or just unaware enough to include a major spoiler in a review, most editors would be on the ball enough to catch it and stop it from going all the way to press. I would assume that that's the case. Certainly that's been the case in the few times that I've slipped up and done it. So that is how I feel about spoilers. I don't really care about them, but I do respect them, as is true for a lot of the elements on this tag. And that is the Reading Pet Peeves tag. I don't know if anybody tagged me on this, and I don't know who hasn't done this. All the cool kids are doing it. So if I remember, I'll leave a link to a bunch of the cool kids doing this tag. And if you haven't done it, of course, this is the kind of nosy tag that I love. So if you haven't done it, feel free to do it. I definitely want to hear your answers. These aren't the only pet peeves that I have about reading, so I'm sure that we'll be back to this subject in due time, but not today. So that's it for today. I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.